Some of the things that were mentioned there, talking about like being part of the team, part of the jigsaw, that brings on to the key considerations working with the boxer. And my point that I want to say is, from my perspective, being the strength and conditioning coach, I kind of know my place, even though it's like a big part of the team. But where does strength training actually come? If you talk about hierarchy, you've got your sparring, you've got your bag work, you've got your pad work as well, and then you've got your conditioning, and probably strength work is going to come a fifth place. Even though it's really important, you can't think that, right, this are going to try and optimise the physiological adaptations from your strength training. That can have a big impact on the conditioning, big impact on the sparring and the technique work as well. So you kind of like have to think about, right, how important is the strength work, and in terms of each camp. So like, for example, let's say we're doing heavy strength training. This boxer needs to improve the maximum strength. Ideally, they need to improve their back squat. So you know, whenever I've done a back squat training, I'm sore the next day, I'm tight. I'm imagining like what that is for the boxer as well. So like, I think that is a massive consideration. So you can't just see it in black and white. This boxer needs to improve the back squat in order to get strong. But what methods can you put in place to make sure that you can still improve that, but not have a detrimental impact on the training?
I think, on that you've got to look on the macro level as opposed to the micro level. We'd be a bit egotistical to say, I think you touched on it there, Al, about writing things down and how the program evolution starts. One thing I'd say is don't be married to your program. We need to act on the fly. Yes, we have some strategy and structure to this overall process, but be willing to adapt and overcome tends to be what I say. Think macro, not micro. So I could present so many different instances where this happens, where the fighter would come, we go through our basic biomarkers, we do our kind of neuromuscular fatigue testing and monitoring, but just having a conversation with them, okay, what have you done this week, what have you got tomorrow, and they're flat as a pancake, so I've then got a relatively high volume session. Well, I'm obviously not going to adhere to that session because I've got to look at, okay, they've got sparring tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. There is a bigger pitch to be had for sure.
I think for me, I'm probably going to mention a few different things that fit into our different areas, but our boxers are undergoing a process of adaptation, and those adaptations take time, but you've also got this goal at the end of camp. They've got to fight. Now sometimes what we want to get out of them physiologically and the adaptations that we want to induce from them don't always sit right in terms of the camp length, or they might not sit right in terms of the opponent that they're facing as well. But understanding the length of the camp is very important to understand what adaptations you can drop in and try and induce at what particular point in time, and perhaps if you've got a plan that's maybe 2 or 3 fights ahead as well, and you kind of got a bit of an understanding of where your particular boxer or athlete is at in their journey towards their ultimate goal, that also helps a lot as well. Related to the adaptations and the time length as well, I think we really need to consider the athlete's training history. So, for example, we haven't trained Jamie and Gavin McDonnell the same as we have with Jordan and Fowler. Jamie and Gavin have got a very well established training history, training a particular type of way. They're very aerobic athletes, and they're, and they'll admit it, they're not the strongest, they're not the most forceful. Now, one of the things we like to do in our program is to introduce a lot of forcefulness in our athletes and a lot of high intensity work, but sometimes you can't do it, and you do need to acknowledge the training history and the strengths of their athlete. And so we, in terms of their conditioning, are taking a longer approach and try to hit more around aerobic capacity, so longer high intensity intervals rather than the short ones that you would see a lot of our guys doing on the curve. And I think this is probably relevant to you as well, Rob, is injury history. That's a huge one. You know, whether they've got something that will, you know, limit certain exercises that they do in the gym in their strength, or whether it's, you know, they may have a sore Achilles, which means they can't do X, Y, Z in conditioning, or they don't, you know, they can't go on a long road run, or, you know, do something like that. That's another thing. Yeah. I think the biggest thing is, yes, they've got to fight at the end of the camp, but they've also got to make weight. You know, and how much weight do they need to drop, and when is a huge consideration for us, because if they need to drop a lot of weight and they're in a big energy deficit, that impairs what we can do. Definitely. In S&C, and it's a, you know, it's a big thing that we've got to work around. So those, for me, those are the major challenges and considerations that we need to make in terms of programming, and then we can start to think about where we put in our little jigsaw puzzle pieces to try and make that puzzle.